Nobody bumped into Leary anymore. They used to back when she first arrived on Compass 7 Station 3 years ago. Back then, she was solid enough that people would accidentally touch her shoulder in crowded hallways. They would mumble sorry without looking at her face. Now they walked straight through the space where she stood, and she had to press herself against walls to avoid the collision. She was not a ghost. She was Velthary. Her species had a curse that scientists called a biological adaptation. When a Velthary felt seen, truly acknowledged by another being, their bodies became solid and visible. When they felt forgotten, overlooked, treated like furniture or empty air, they faded. It happened slowly at first. A little transparency around the edges. Then more. Then you became something people looked through instead of looked at. Leary had not been fully visible in 2 years. She worked in environmental systems, maintaining the air filters and temperature controls that kept 12,000 beings alive on this station. She crawled through maintenance shafts. She replaced broken sensors. She calibrated oxygen mixers for 17 different atmospheric requirements. Important work. Essential work. Work that nobody thanked her for because nobody knew she did it. That morning, she walked through Corridor 7 during the shift change. Hundreds of workers moved around her, like water flowing past a stone. A group of Caresi laughed at some joke, their blue-green skin glistening under the lights. 2 Sarthi administrators marched past, their armored bodies taking up most of the hallway. A small cleaning drone bumped against her ankle and beeped in confusion before rolling away. Nobody said hello. Nobody nodded. Nobody saw. Leary found her usual spot for lunch. It was a maintenance alcove behind a recycling unit, just big enough for one person to sit with their knees pulled up. She had eaten here every day for 3 years. The same alcove, the same silence, the same feeling of being erased from the universe one meal at a time. She unwrapped her food packet and ate without tasting. The station announcement system crackled. Attention, all personnel. New arrival processing in Docking Bay 4. Human vessel Wandering Star now cleared for boarding. Leary paused mid-bite. Humans were still rare in this sector of space. They had only made contact with the galactic community 15 years ago. Most species found them strange. Too loud, too friendly, too interested in things that did not concern them. Curiosity pulled at her. She had never seen a human up close. She finished her meal quickly and made her way toward Docking Bay 4. The corridors grew more crowded as she approached. Everyone wanted to see the new arrivals. Humans were entertainment. Humans were bizarre. Humans did things that made other species uncomfortable and fascinated at the same time. Leary found a spot near a support column where she could watch without being in the way. Not that anyone would notice if she was in the way. The airlock opened. A small group of humans walked out, blinking in the station lights. They were strange-looking creatures. Soft skin in various brown shades. Hair on their heads in different textures. 2 arms, 2 legs, forward-facing eyes. Nothing remarkable about their bodies. But their faces moved constantly. Smiling, frowning, looking around with obvious curiosity. One of them, a tall man with dark skin and a wide smile, waved at the crowd like he knew them all personally. The Sarthi administrator waiting to greet them stepped back slightly, confused by this gesture. The human did not seem to notice the confusion. He walked forward and extended his hand. Daniel Okoye. Cargo coordinate. Happy to be here. The administrator stared at the extended hand. Humans touch strangers, Leary remembered reading. They pressed their hands together as greeting. Most species found this unhygienic and overly intimate. But the human just stood there smiling, hand out, waiting. Finally, the administrator awkwardly touched Daniel's palm with one armored finger. The human's smile grew even wider, as if this counted as success. Leary watched as Daniel and the other humans were led away for processing. The crowd began to scatter, the entertainment over. But Leary stayed a moment longer, watching the tall human's back as he disappeared around a corner. He had looked at everyone. Not through them, at them, even the cleaning drones, even the maintenance workers in their dull uniforms. His eyes had swept across the crowd like everyone in it mattered enough to see. For one brief second, his gaze had passed over the spot where Leary stood. She knew he had not actually seen her. She was too faded for that. But he had looked in her direction. He had looked at the space she occupied like it might contain something worth noticing. It was nothing. It meant nothing. But that night, alone in her tiny quarters, Leary looked in the mirror. For just a moment, she thought she could see the outline of her own face a little more clearly than usual. She told herself it was just the lighting. She told herself she was being foolish. But somewhere deep in her chest, in the place where hope used to live before she learned to stop hoping, something small and fragile flickered. Tomorrow, she would go back to being invisible. But tonight, for just one moment, someone had looked in her direction. And that was more than she had gotten in a very long time. The smell was wrong. That was the first thing Leary noticed when she entered Sector 14 for her routine maintenance check. Something warm and unfamiliar hung in the recycled air, something that made her stomach tighten in a way she did not understand. She followed the smell to its source. The human was sitting at his workstation in the cargo bay, but he was not working. He had a small heating unit plugged into his console, and he was cooking something. Actually cooking, on a work desk, in the middle of his shift. Leary had never seen anything like it. She knew she should just do her job and leave. Check the air filters. Calibrate the sensors. Disappear back into the walls like she always did. But her feet would not move. She stood in the doorway, watching. Daniel Okoye hummed while he worked. He had containers spread around him, ingredients that Leary did not recognize. His hands moved quickly, chopping and mixing and stirring. He seemed completely unaware that he was doing something impossible, something that would get any other worker written up for safety violations. A Caresi worker walked past him. "Human, you are making smells." Daniel looked up with that strange, wide smile. "Good smells or bad smells?" The Caresi paused, confused by the question. "Smells. In the work area. This is not appropriate." "Yeah, probably not," Daniel agreed cheerfully. "But I was hungry and the food dispensers here taste like sadness. Want some?" He held out a container toward the Caresi, who recoiled as if offered poison. "I do not eat with others," the Caresi said stiffly. "Eating is private." "Huh, that's too bad." Daniel shrugged and went back to his cooking. "More for me, then." The Caresi hurried away, and Leary watched him go. She understood his reaction. Most species ate alone. Eating was biological necessity, not social activity. The idea of sharing food with a stranger was bizarre, uncomfortable, almost obscene. Humans were very strange. Leary moved quietly along the wall toward the environmental panel she needed to check. She had done this 100 times in this sector. Open the panel. Run diagnostics. Replace any worn components. Close the panel. Leave. Simple. Invisible. Forgettable. She was almost finished when the voice came from behind her. "Hey, do you want some?" Leary froze. Her hand stopped halfway to the diagnostic tool. She did not turn around. He could not be talking to her. Nobody talked to her. "The thing I'm making," the voice continued. "I made too much. Happens every time. My grandmother used to say, I cook like I'm feeding an army." Slowly, very slowly, Leary turned. Daniel was looking directly at her. Not through her. At her. His dark eyes were focused on her face with clear, obvious attention. Her voice came out rough. She had not spoken to anyone in weeks. "I'm working." "Me too. Technically." He grinned. "But a person's gotta eat, right? Come on, take a break. I promise it won't kill you." He held out a container. Inside was something golden and bubbling, with red sauce and white chunks of something soft. Leary's body flickered. She felt it happen, felt herself becoming slightly more solid without meaning to. The shock of being seen was doing something to her biology. "I do not." She struggled for words. "I should not." "You're Velthari, right?" Daniel asked. "I read about your species on the trip here. The file said you're mostly solitary and prefer to be left alone." He tilted his head. "But the files also said humans are aggressive and territorial. So I figure maybe the files are wrong about a lot of things." He was still holding out the container, still looking at her, still seeing her. "I'm not hungry," Leary managed. "Okay." Daniel nodded, but he did not look away. "I'm here every day, same time. If you change your mind." He went back to his food, and Leary finished her maintenance work as fast as possible. Her hands were shaking. Her skin felt strange, like it could not decide how visible to be. She fled the sector without looking back. That night, she dreamed of the smell of the human's food, warm and rich and completely foreign. She dreamed of his eyes looking at her like she was a real person, like she existed. She woke up gasping. In the mirror, she could see herself more clearly than yesterday. Still faded, still mostly transparent, but the outline of her face was sharper. The dark pools of her eyes were more defined. It meant nothing, she told herself. One human noticing her did not change anything. She was still invisible to everyone who mattered. She was still the maintenance worker that nobody remembered. But her feet carried her to Sector 14 again the next day. And the day after that. She did not take his food. She did not speak to him. But she started finding reasons to be there in that cargo bay where a strange human cooked impossible meals and looked at people like they all deserved to be seen. And slowly, so slowly she almost did not notice, Leary began to remember what it felt like to be visible. Leary had run out of excuses. The environmental systems in Sector 14 were now the most thoroughly maintained systems on the entire station. She had checked every sensor 3 times. She had replaced filters that did not need replacing. She had calibrated equipment that was already perfectly calibrated. The truth was simple and embarrassing. She came to this sector because of him. Daniel had started teaching the young Caresi worker how to play something called cards. They sat together during breaks, the human explaining rules that made no sense while the Caresi made confused clicking sounds. Other workers walked past and stared. A supervisor stopped once to watch, then shook his head and walked away. Nobody understood why a human would spend his rest time with a subordinate. It was not normal. It was not professional. It violated every unwritten rule about workplace hierarchy. Daniel did not seem to care. Today, Leary had positioned herself behind a storage container where she could watch without being obvious. She had become good at finding angles where she could observe the human without him noticing. Except he always noticed. "Hey, maintenance lady." Leary pressed herself against the container, her body flickering toward invisible. "I know you're there. You're there every day." Daniel's voice was warm, not angry. "Come on out. I made something special today." She could run. She could fade completely and slip away through the maintenance corridors. She could go back to being nobody, being nothing, being safe. Her feet carried her out from behind the container instead. Daniel smiled like she had given him a gift. He held up a flat box that smelled incredible. "Pizza," he announced. "It's an earth food. My grandmother's recipe." "Well, mostly her recipe. I had to substitute some ingredients because apparently mozzarella cheese doesn't exist in this sector of the galaxy." "I do not know what pizza is," Leary said quietly. "That's the best part." Daniel opened the box. Inside was a circle of golden bread covered in red sauce and melted white substance. Pizza is food that's designed to be shared. You can't really eat pizza alone. I mean, you can, but you're not supposed to. It's meant to bring people together. Leary stared at the food. "I do not understand." "Food that is meant to be shared." "Yeah, back on Earth, if you want to turn a stranger into a friend, you share pizza with them. If you want to celebrate something good, you share pizza. If you want to comfort someone who's sad, pizza. It's kind of our solution to everything." He pulled out a triangular piece and held it toward her. "Let's share pizza," he said simply. Leary's hands were trembling as she reached out. She had not touched food given by another person in years. She had not been offered anything by anyone in so long that she had forgotten what it felt like. The pizza was warm in her hands. Solid. Real. She took a bite. The flavors exploded across her tongue. Rich and tangy and savory all at once. Her eyes widened. She had never tasted anything like this. "Good, right?" Daniel was grinning. She nodded, unable to speak, and took another bite. They stood there in the cargo bay, 2 beings from different worlds, sharing food that should not exist this far from Earth. Daniel ate his piece messily, sauce getting on his fingers. Leary ate hers carefully, like it might disappear if she moved too fast. "So," Daniel said between bites, "what's your name? I've been calling you maintenance lady in my head, which is rude." "Leary. Leary." He said it slowly, like he was memorizing it. "I'm Daniel, but you probably knew that. Yes. She paused. You are very loud. Daniel laughed. It was a full, open sound that made several nearby workers turn and stare. Yeah, I get that a lot. Humans are loud. We're also nosy, and we don't know how to mind our own business. He looked at her directly. Speaking of which, can I ask you something personal? Leary tensed. What? The fading thing. With your species. Does it hurt? Nobody had ever asked her that. Nobody had ever cared enough to wonder. Not physically, she said after a long moment. But it is lonely. When no one sees you, you start to forget that you exist. You become what they see, which is nothing. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, that sounds really lonely. For words. Simple words. But they cracked something open inside her chest. It is, she whispered. Well, Daniel reached out and, very gently, touched her arm. His hand was warm and solid against her skin. I see you, Leary. Okay, you're not nothing to me. She looked down at her arm where he touched it. The skin, there was more visible than it had been in years. Solid and real and present. She did not know what to say, so she took another bite of pizza instead. Behind them, the Caressy worker named Toval approached hesitantly. Human Daniel, you are speaking to the maintenance creature. Daniel's smile faded slightly. Her name is Leary. And yes, I am. Want some pizza? Toval's eyes moved to Leary, actually looking at her, perhaps for the first time. Leary felt herself flicker under the unfamiliar attention. I do not eat with others, Toval said slowly. Your loss. Daniel shrugged. More for us, right, Leary? Us. He said us. Like she was a person. Like she belonged. Leary looked at the human with his messy food and his loud voice and his strange customs, and she felt something she had almost forgotten how to feel. She felt seen. 3 weeks changed everything. Leary did not mean to become visible. It just happened. Every lunch with Daniel, every conversation, every moment of being truly seen added another layer of solidity to her fading body. She could see her own reflection now. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. She could see the dark depths of her own eyes looking back at her. Other people started noticing too. A Sarthi worker bumped into her in the corridor and actually apologized. A cleaning drone stopped and scanned her, registering her as an obstacle for the first time in years. The food dispenser asked for her identification code, instead of just letting her walk past like she was not there. Small things. Tiny things. But to Leary, they felt like miracles. The lunch table in Sector 14 had grown. Daniel refused to eat alone, and his refusal was contagious. The Caressy worker Toval had started joining them, sitting stiffly at first, then gradually relaxing. A Delori engineer named Senna began appearing with questions about human music. Even a young Sarthi named Ravik started lingering nearby, pretending to work while listening to Daniel's stories about Earth. Daniel shared pizza with all of them. He had found a supplier for something called tomato sauce and convinced the station's food synthesizers to produce something close to mozzarella. It was not perfect, he said, but it was close enough. Close enough to bring people together. Leary had started talking more. Her voice was rusty from years of disuse, but words came easier now. She told Daniel about her homeworld, destroyed by a mining accident before she was born. She told him about the other Velthari scattered across the galaxy, too few and too fated to find each other. She told him things she had never told anyone. He listened to all of it. He remembered all of it. Then Administrator Kareth summoned Daniel to his office. Leary heard about it from Toval, who heard about it from Ravik, who had been delivering supplies when the summons came. She waited in the cargo bay, her visibility flickering with anxiety, until Daniel returned. His face was strange. Not angry exactly. More like confused. What happened? Leary asked. I got lectured about inappropriate fraternization patterns. Daniel shook his head. Apparently eating lunch with my coworkers is suspicious behavior. What did you tell him? I told him I didn't know eating lunch was a crime. Daniel grinned. He didn't have an answer for that. Because it's not a crime. It's just not normal. Leary felt cold. You should stop. I do not want you to have problems because of me. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his cooking supplies and started setting up his heating unit. Leary, do you know why humans share food? She shook her head. Back on Earth, Our ancestors survived because they worked together. They hunted together, gathered together, raised children together, and they ate together. Sharing food wasn't just about nutrition. It was about saying, "You matter to me. You're part of my group. I won't let you starve." He started mixing ingredients, his hands moving with practiced ease. "When I share pizza with you, I'm not just giving you food. I'm saying you belong. You're one of my people. And nobody, not Administrator Kareth, not anyone, gets to tell me who my people are." Leary did not know what to say. Her eyes were burning with something that might have been tears if Velthury could cry. The next day, Daniel invited even more people to lunch. He introduced Leary by name to everyone who came. He asked about her work, her opinions, her ideas. He treated her presence as normal and expected, as if a fated Velthury eating lunch with a cargo coordinator was the most natural thing in the universe. Slowly, others started doing the same. Toval apologized one afternoon, awkwardly and stiffly. "I did not see you before. For 3 years you worked near my station, and I never spoke to you. I am sorry." Leary did not know how to accept an apology. She had never received one. "It is okay," she managed. "No." Toval's blue-green skin rippled with shame. "It is not okay, but I will do better." And they did. They all did. By the end of the month, Leary's lunch table had become a station landmark. Beings from different species gathered there to eat together, share stories, learn about each other's customs. It was chaotic and loud, and completely against every social norm on Compass 7. It was the best thing Leary had ever experienced. Then the alarm started. Red lights flashed. Warning sirens screamed. The station's voice announced emergency protocols. Life support failure in multiple sectors. Atmosphere systems critical. All maintenance personnel report immediately. Leary looked at Daniel. Her hands were steady. Her body was solid. For the first time in years, she was ready to be seen. The central systems hub was chaos. Sarthi officers shouted orders that nobody followed. Engineers ran between terminals, pulling up data that made no sense. Warning lights painted everything in shades of red. Leary pushed through the crowd. For once, people moved out of her way. Not because they saw her, but because they were too panicked to notice anything. She reached the main diagnostic console and began reading the data. Her breath caught. This was bad. This was very bad. The primary life support grid had cascaded. A failure in Sector 8 had spread to Sector 9, then Sector 10. The backup systems were trying to compensate, but they were overloading. At this rate, the station would lose atmosphere in 6 sectors within 4 hours. 12,000 beings lived on Compass 7. Many would die. "Move!" A Sarthi officer shoved past her. "This is an emergency zone. Maintenance workers should report to their supervisors." Leary stood her ground. "I know what is wrong." The officer did not even look at her. "Report to your supervisor." The cascade started in Junction Box 14C. Leary's voice was stronger than she expected. "I replaced a component there last month. The replacement was faulty. It overheated and triggered the primary failure." Now the officer looked at her, but his eyes slid away almost immediately, like she was not important enough to focus on. "Maintenance workers should report to their supervisors," he repeated. Leary felt the old invisibility creeping back. The old urge to fade, to disappear, to let someone else handle this. Then a familiar voice cut through the noise. "Everyone shut up." Daniel pushed through the crowd, his face serious for the first time since Leary had known him. He pointed at her. "This woman knows these systems better than anyone on this station. She's been maintaining them for 3 years while the rest of you walked past her like she didn't exist. If anyone can fix this, it's her. So shut up and listen." The room went silent. Every eye turned to Leary. Sarthi officers, Caresi engineers, Delori technicians, all of them looking at her. Actually looking at her. Her body solidified under their attention. She felt herself becoming more present, more real, more visible than she had been in years. "The junction box failure created a feedback loop," she said, her voice steady. "The backup systems are trying to compensate, but they're pulling power from the wrong sources. We need to manually reset the primary grid at the central hub while simultaneously isolating the damaged sectors." An engineer frowned. That would require someone to physically access the central hub. The atmosphere there is already compromised. No one can survive those conditions. Velthury can. Leary took a breath. My species evolved on a planet with unstable atmosphere. I can survive conditions that would kill most of you. I can make the repair. Silence. Then the Sarthi officer who had dismissed her spoke. You are certain? Yes. Daniel stepped forward. I'm going with her. Human, the conditions will kill you. I'm going with her, Daniel repeated. She'll need someone to carry equipment. I'll use a breathing apparatus. I'll be fine. He looked at Leary, and she saw something in his eyes that she did not have a name for. I'm not letting you do this alone, he said quietly. 20 minutes later, they stood at the entrance to the compromised sector. Daniel wore an emergency breathing mask and carried a heavy bag of tools. Leary wore nothing but her standard work clothes. The door opened. Toxic air rushed out, making Daniel cough even through his mask. Stay close to me, Leary said. Do exactly what I tell you. They moved through the damaged sector. Leary guided them around collapsed panels and sparking conduits. She knew these corridors. She had walked them hundreds of times, invisible and alone. Now she walked them with purpose. The central hub was worse than she expected. Smoke filled the air. Alarms screamed. The temperature was dropping fast as the life support failed. There, Leary pointed to a panel high on the wall. I need to access that junction. Daniel boosted her up without hesitation. His hands were warm and steady on her back. She opened the panel and began working. Her fingers moved quickly, reconnecting circuits, rerouting power, isolating damaged systems. She had done this 1,000 times in smaller repairs. This was the same work, just bigger, just more important, just visible. Almost there, she murmured. The station shuddered. More alarms. Daniel's breathing was getting harder. The mask was not designed for extended use. Leary, one more connection. She reached deep into the panel. Got it. The lights flickered. The alarms changed tone. The emergency systems recognized the repair and began compensating. It's working, Daniel said, checking his handheld scanner. Atmosphere stabilizing. You did it. They made their way back through the damaged sector. By the time they reached the safe zone, Daniel was stumbling. Leary half-carried him through the final door. The crowd waiting for them was huge. Sarthi officers, Caresi workers, engineers and technicians and administrators. All of them watching as Leary emerged from the toxic sector, supporting the human who had refused to let her face danger alone. For the first time in her life, Leary stood before a crowd that could actually see her. And she was radiant. 3 months felt like a lifetime. Leary walked through Corridor 7 during the shift change. The same corridor where she had once pressed herself against walls, fading into nothing while hundreds of beings walked past without seeing her. The same corridor where she had learned to be invisible. Now people nodded at her. A Caresi worker waved. A young Sarthi stopped to ask about the air quality in his sector. Senior Coordinator Leary, he said, using her new title. Is there anything I should be concerned about? Everything is functioning normally, Leary said. But thank you for asking. The Sarthi moved on, and Leary continued walking. She was solid now, fully visible, permanently present. The last 3 months had filled in every faded edge of her body until she looked like she had always looked as a child, before years of being overlooked had taught her to disappear. She had been promoted after the crisis. Senior Environmental Coordinator. It came with a bigger workspace, a team of junior technicians, and the authority to make decisions without asking permission. But the best part was not the title or the workspace. The best part was the lunch table. Daniel was already there when she arrived at Sector 14. His cooking supplies had expanded into a small portable kitchen. The table around him was crowded with beings from a dozen species, all talking over each other, all sharing food. Toval sat at Daniel's right hand, clicking happily about some new card game the human had taught them. Senna the Delori engineer was arguing with Ravik the young Sarthi about the best way to prepare root vegetables. A group of workers from the night shift had started showing up just to experience this strange human tradition before going to bed. Leary, Daniel waved her over. I save you a seat. She sat down beside him, and he handed her a slice of pizza without being asked. It had become ritual now. Comfortable. Familiar. How was the meeting with Kareth? He asked. Leary allowed herself a small smile. He made an announcement, station-wide, about recognizing contributions from all personnel. No kidding. Daniel laughed. The same guy who told me I was inappropriately fraternizing? The same. I think he is embarrassed that the station almost died because he never noticed the person who knew how to save it. Progress. Daniel raised his pizza slice in a mock toast. Here's to being noticed. The table echoed his gesture, slices of pizza held high in the air. Leary ate her lunch and listened to the chaos around her. More humans had arrived on Compass, 7 in recent weeks. They were all like Daniel, loud and curious and completely uninterested in the social rules that everyone else followed. They asked questions. They shared food. They looked at beings that other species had learned to overlook. The station was changing because of them, not through force or technology or political power, just through the simple, radical act of treating everyone like they mattered. After lunch, Leary found Daniel alone on the observation deck. He was staring out at the stars, his face thoughtful. What are you thinking about? She asked. Home. He did not turn around. My grandmother. She would have loved this place. All these different species, all these different ways of living. She used to say you can learn everything about a person by who they share their meals with. Leary stepped up beside him. Their reflections were faint in the window, Human and Velthury standing together. What did you learn about me? She asked quietly. Daniel finally looked at her. His smile was soft. That you were always worth seeing. Everyone else just needed glasses. Leary laughed. It was a sound she had almost forgotten she could make. 3 years of silence, and now she laughed like it was the easiest thing in the world. The next morning, she was reviewing reports when her door chimed. Outside stood a young Velthury, small and thin and barely visible, her body flickering in and out of solidity like a candle in the wind. She could not have been on the station more than a few days. I am sorry to bother you, the young one whispered. Her voice was rough from disuse. They told me there was another Velthury here. I did not believe them. We are always alone. Leary felt her chest tighten. She remembered being that small, that faded, that invisible. What is your name? She asked gently. Savi. Hello, Savi. I am Leary. She stepped back and opened her door wider. Would you like to come in? Savi hesitated. I do not want to bother you. You are not bothering me. Leary reached out and took the young Velthury's hand. Her fingers were cold, almost insubstantial. Actually, I was just about to go to lunch. Would you like to join me? Lunch? With others. With friends. Leary smiled. Have you ever tried pizza? Savi shook her head, confusion clear on her faded features. Come with me, Leary said. I want to introduce you to someone. A human. He is very strange. He talks too much, and he shares food with everyone he meets. But he is also the kindest person I have ever known. She led Savi through the corridors towards Sector 14, toward the crowded table and the warm smells and the sound of different species laughing together. Toward Daniel, who looked up with his wide smile and said, New friend? Perfect timing. I made extra. He pulled out 2 slices of pizza and held them out. Let's share, he said. And somewhere in the vast, cold universe, at a table surrounded by beings who had once been strangers, a young Velthury took her first bite of Earth food and began the long journey from invisible to seen. The cycle continued, and this time, no one would fade alone.